Louder! And what's up, everybody, and welcome back to the TJ Bowser Power Hour. I am finally doing this damn show again, and I am so excited, and I got one of my best friends with me. Joining me today is the creator of GodPunk, creator of the Big Bad Beetle Bros podcast, and one of the most talented writers I know, Mr. Cameron Lee. What's up, buddy?
How's it going, man? Good to be on Power Hour again, I guess. Yeah. I forgot it'd been 4 years, but goddamn, we're back. You're back.
Yes, it takes some time. All these things getting in my way, aka other shows, Project Louder, my new professional career, doing all these things that I do. But we are here to talk about the things that you do and the thing that you're doing right now, which is GodPunk issue number 2. When we talked last, I think maybe 0 was just out. We were talking about maybe doing issue 1 or the Kickstarter for that at the time. So we're well past that. Like we said, maybe 3 years in the future, 4 years in the future now. And you are now doing some really cool stuff. GodPunk's a lot more mature. You're just chugging away with this story. So right now, live is the Kickstarter for issue number 2. And I want to say you're at what, 50%?
Yeah, actually, I think we just hit today. I think we just went over 60%, and we're right about 50% through the time of the campaign, because it's a 30-day campaign. Started on the 4th of July, goes until the 3rd of August, and to time of recording today is the 17th. So right smack dab about halfway. Right about the halfway point, because I did a 2-week update today, and the 2-week is actually tomorrow. So yeah, and we're I think 60% through. We just went over $900 raised out of the $1,500 goal, which is basically to fund the initial print run of issue 2. Issue 0, I did basically the same thing. It was like $1,000 goal. And then issue 1, I didn't do a Kickstarter for because COVID had really taken a swing at everybody by the time I started issue 1. So I kind of held off on that and just released it on my own, and then went through Broken Reality Comics to release issue 1. And then now with issue 2, we're back to Kickstarter, and full steam ahead. New art team, new a lot of stuff. It's I'm doing a lot more with issue 2 than I did with 0 or 1.
So number 2, what's it about? What characters are you going to introduce? Any new characters, storylines? What can fans expect with issue 2?
Yeah, so for anybody who's not familiar with GodPunk in general, it is basically Power Rangers meets Indiana Jones with a healthy heaping of Greek mythology, and it all takes place right here where I'm from in Kansas City, Missouri, and basically follows a aspiring archaeologist, Connor Thorne, as he uses the power of the Greek god of cicadas, Tithonus, to defend ancient artifacts from the nefarious Wasp Troopers, a mysterious evil organization out to steal artifacts for, world domination and unleashing chaos and all the usual horrible evil villain organization stuff from Power Rangers and Kamen Rider and Super Sentai and all those kinds of inspirations. And issue 0 was really the cut and dry origin story, getting my feet wet into making comics, experimenting. I did that with Ko Nguyen, Masquerace on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and everything. Had a ton of fun working with him. Went to the same thing with issue 1. Issue 1 was kind of the first real episode, real story of GodPunk, defending a local art gallery from Demacaris, the first big bad villain of the week that appeared. And with issue 2, I really wanted to step everything up. So we brought in a new art team, Chris Burr, who's a German artist that I've just had a great time working with so far. He's really nailed down the kind of dynamic, almost anime style art. His colors just pop, have a really fun, almost like a Studio Trigger kind of animation style to them. a lot of pastels, a lot of like light colors, not a lot of like really dark scenes and settings, until they're like necessary. But like just in general, like a lot of color and stuff that you would see in like an episode of Power Rangers or something
Yes.
like that, that I just like really have loved to see come together. And yeah, issue 2 basically picks up with Connor is full on a hero. He is completely in on the street level superhero business now, uh, working with his two friends Magnus and Emily, some colleagues of his at the university, to protect artifacts at the local museum, that inspired by the Nelson Atkins Museum here in KC, and art galleries and all that kind of stuff. Uh, and basically, everything starts to kind of fall apart when he and Magnus try to investigate a local club that is opening up and claiming to have the Spear of Destiny or the Lance of Longinus, depending on which story you end up using, but famous historical slash pseudo historical artifact, mystic artifact that supposedly pierced the side of Jesus when he was hanging on the cross, has been kind of passed down from leader to world leaders over the years. Hitler was after it. Napoleon was after it. I think the U.S. had it for a period of time after World War II. The one that's actually kind of the real one was made in like I think the 8th century CE, so quite a while after Jesus's era. But that's it's still an ancient art. It's still an old
Yeah.
artifact by all means, but it's not necessarily it doesn't have
The
the mythic
one.
stature. Yeah. And you could tell by look, it's like gilded and all sorts of stuff. Like you could tell looking at it, it's not something a like random Roman soldier would have had 2,000 years ago. But yeah, we get two new villains coming after the spear, basically. Metis and Marsyas, inspired by a sea goddess and a satyr, a goat man. And yeah, Chris just absolutely nailed the designs on these. And Godpunk gets some new power ups and some new abilities unlocked, both for better and for worse. I won't go too much into that because that's like the big meat and potatoes of issue 2 and like going into issue 3 and stuff. But yeah, it's just been a lot of fun to work with Chris. And then I brought in Brian Morehouse, good friend of mine, and he's been working as the editor for issue 2. Had really been there since issue 0, helping me just in the background, and having a lot of conversations like you and I will have of just like working through story arcs and ideas and like character development and stuff. And with me getting ready to start grad school in a month, and trying to write an actual like full book history book. Like I got other like projects going on, but I want to
Yeah.
keep doing Godpunk and keep it going at a good pace. Brian has been generous enough to kind of pop in and be like, hey, I could take the wheel when you need me to. I'll coordinate with the art team, with Micah Myers, the letterer, who has also been amazing to work with, and like kind of the big name that I've gotten to work with on this. It's been really fun. But yeah, it's been really exciting to get to see it all come together, and especially once the Kickstarter dropped, just kind of seeing unfamiliar faces pop into the backer lists has been really interesting and fun to see. So many people pop into comments, or people like DM me, or sending me emails or messages on straight up on Kickstarter being like, hey, I want you to come on this podcast, or hey, I want you to can you tell me more about this story, or what are your inspirations, or how come I didn't hear about you before, like things like that. It's like, oh damn, like this is hitting like people who aren't just my friends and family, like issue 0 was. Yeah, it's been really fun.
So for folks who didn't listen to the last episode I did with you, what kind of inspired you to start this whole Godpunk comic book journey? We mentioned Power Rangers, Indiana Jones, mythology, but what kind of was like the moment where you're like, I'm gonna make a comic book?
Yeah, like the Power Rangers and like Indiana Jones and stuff was all like that's like in the background. It's like background radiation for my like what inspired all this to happen. But what really made me want to do Godpunk specifically, but just made me want to do a comic and do this story. I was I don't know, a sophomore in college, I think sophomore or junior in college, getting my art history degree. And I had befriended a bunch of indie toku guys. Matt, the creator of the Immortal Red Fox, which is a great series and American manga style comic. If you guys want to check that out, really huge inspiration to me and a bunch of other creators. And Jamingers from Ivan and Time Strikers from Alejandro, and just really diving into this kind of like world of indie tokusatsu, like small creators, especially like in the US and in France and China and like outside of Japan, but also the local hero movement in Japan is really good about recognizing creators in other countries that are
Hmm.
doing the kind of like local hero or like indie toku style stuff. And I befriended Matt, and I was just hanging out in college, and I was sitting around doodling, and I was like drawing like a cicada themed common writer or
Hmm.
a cicada themed local hero. And I'm sure it was like now it was like I think late summer, early spring, early fall, start of the semester. The cicadas were like chirping outside the lecture hall. So I was like sitting there and doodling, and I sent some pictures off to Matt and a couple of the other indie toku guys, and they were like, "Okay, awesome. When are you making the suit?" Like, "Oh, oh, I'm like doing this." And they're like, "Yeah, of course you're doing this. Like, what are you talking about? Like, when are you making the suit? When are you making a comic? Like, what's the names? What's the story arc? Like, let's come on, let's hash this out." And like, I had a couple like calls with some of the guys and just like messed around with it, and I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna do this. Like, this is." I'm like drowning in anxiety at school. I am like dealing with a bunch of personal stuff with like family and health and all sorts of stuff. Like I need an outlet. I need something to do that's
Mhm.
like tangential to what I'm doing right now. Like it's using my like passion and knowledge in like art history and archaeology and stuff, and just like toku and all my inspirations that I've grown up with, and getting to like vent that into a creative outlet. And yeah, like that was like the moment. It was like there was like one like a Friday going into the weekend where I like doodled like the first couple sketches of what would become Godpunk, sent them off to a group chat, and everybody was like, "Okay, we're doing this. Like, we're gonna help you figure this out. What do you need?" And that was yeah, that was it.
So, from variant covers to places in your stories, Godpunk is rooted in Kansas City. That's where you're from, and it's cool because it's very similar to what I do with Paranoia.
Hmm.
But how does your city influence your writing, and what are some local landmarks that you show in Godpunk?
So I think like that's another thing that like really came out in issue two,
Mhm.
and I think like part of that is like working with like Brian and uh, Micah and Chris, and like having other people on the art team that I can bounce ideas around from. Brian's also from Kansas City, so that helps too. Um, I like grew up not having heroes from Kansas City. You know, we've got like Superman's from like generic Kansas, Smallville, and then goes off to Metropolis, which everybody kind of like chalks up to like Chicago, New York, Detroit, something like that, where it's like, no, like Kansas City isn't in comics. He's not like Kansas City's not in movies. It's not really in media much at all. And I was like, but we have like so much. Like I like I love this town. I am like a like such a like stan for Kansas City, like such a big fan of messing around with stuff here. And we have like a good sized Comic Con with Planet Comic Con and Planet Anime. We have like such a like thriving like foodie culture with so many like really unique restaurants that pop up. There are also like obviously we have the barbecue, which is like the local cuisine that everybody knows Kansas City for. But we have like just so many stuff. There's like great Thai restaurants here. There's great Chinese restaurants here. There's just like there's great like African cuisine like downtown and like in the West Bottoms and stuff. And I really wanted to like put that into the comics. So there's a lot of like I mentioned before, the Nelson Atkins Museum is here in the issue one. I show the Crossroads Arts District, and
Mhm.
the gallery that's in that comic's actually based on a friend of mine's art gallery called Habitat Contemporary that shares a space with the Sherry Leedy Gallery down in the Crossroads. And I kind of like uh, spent a lot of my like uh, young adult time.
Mhm.
I'm still spending a lot of my young adult time in like that part of Kansas City, like the Crossroads, the West Bottoms, like the arts scenes, and like kind of these like little like going to like underground music venues and kind of like dive bars and pop up events and microbreweries and all that kind of stuff that's been really like growing in the city. and like helping it thrive a little bit more. And so I wanted to like put that in. So yeah, there's a lot of like the Nelson Atkins in issue 2, Winstead's Diner, which is like a like 1940s 50s era diner that's a historic monument down by the Country Club Plaza in Kansas City. There's what else do I like generically like the skyline. Like I just really love Kansas City's skyline, specifically like the Bartle Hall pylons and stuff like that. I don't know. I just like the character of this. I know like when you have a story based in New York, people will say like New York is a character, like it's another character in the story. Or like when you're basing a story in Pittsburgh, like Pittsburgh is a character in the story. Like it has an atmosphere, it has an attitude, it influences the like where the characters are going to go and when and how and why. And I feel like I'm trying to portray. I don't know if I'm doing a great job, but I'm trying to portray that with Kansas City, specifically in issue 2. Really trying to work to nail that down because I think like Kansas City is a character, and it is like we don't get a lot of notoriety outside of like the Chiefs, which is great, but it's a very specific thing.
Taylor Swift.
Yes, now we get Taylor Swift and the Chiefs and stuff, and like, which is great. And like, we have waited so damn long for a successful sports franchise, and I will never knock that. And it's like cool to have a world famous pop star frequent like random diners and barbecue joints in Kansas City and going to like music venues and stuff in KC. Like that's awesome. But yeah, I want to like portray Kansas City as it is, as like a character in the town. And it's not like a hustling bustling metropolis like New York or even like Chicago, but it still has a lot of like really I don't know, just like really interesting and unique pockets and neighborhoods that feel like their own towns and their own cultures in and of themselves. And they're just like, one block away from each other because Kansas City's kind of small but spread out. And yeah, I've just been trying to like feed that into it a little bit more.
I fully understand. And it's kind of like easier to write stories within a place that you're very familiar with, because then you're kind of inspired while you're there. And then it's kind of easier to be like, okay, so they went down this road and then the fight happened here and yada, yada, yada. I totally understand. Like you said, sometimes these cities become characters, and you definitely feel that when you see your GodPunk books. It's cool. You definitely get transported to Kansas City for a brief moment.
That's what I was hoping for.
Yes. For the video watchers, I have the QR code for GodPunk Kickstarter issue number 2 up there in the corner. Speaking of the Kickstarter, can you tell us more about the rewards backers can receive from supporting said Kickstarter? Enter any unique or exclusive items that you're excited about.
Yes. Yeah. So the Kickstarter basically starts off like as low as $5. Obviously, you can give lower for no reward if you just want to like contribute $1 or something. But for $5, you'll get the digital copy of issue 2. It's not missing. It's the full 30+ page book. It's just the digital PDF copy. And so you get that for $5. And then moving on up from that, it goes into the physical copies. You can get for just an extra $5 to any tier. You can get the digital copies of issue 0 and 1. You can get physical copies of issue 0 and 1 for an extra, I think it's like $15. And there's rewards that have all of kind of the catch-up bundles where you can get a physical or digital copy of all issues 0 through 2. And one of the new things that I've done with issue 2 is I brought in 2 different artists to do variant covers in kind of drastically different styles.
They're great though. They're so good.
I'm so happy with how they came out. Like I knew they were going to be good going into it because I specifically went to these artists with this in mind and kind of like just let them play. And one of them was Kaiju Hime, who did a hand painted. I wish I had it. It's out in my garage right now. Yeah. But she did a hand painted watercolor piece of GodPunk standing in front of basically a rendition of the Western Auto sign, which is a kind of a famous landmark in Kansas City. Another one, but instead of Western Auto, it says GodPunk number 2 in the big LED signs. And it's so good. Like I said, it's hand painted. You can really tell the like love and attention that was put into it. Really great line work and color work in it, and just like captures the the artistry that I'm trying to like
Yeah.
portray, and kind of the uh I hate the term fine art, but like the uh gallery quality
Yes, yes.
work, I guess, maybe, like that kind of vibe of like this.
It has that vibe.
Yeah, like this is something that you could see like up on a wall in a gallery,
Mhm.
or like someone would, frame, and not other than just me would frame
Yes.
and put up in their house, and like that kind of thing. And she just absolutely nailed it, knocked it out of the park. And then the other one is Iguanodon Designs, who I just fell in love with their stuff on Instagram, because they do these like vintage, like silver and golden age style comic panels, either like remaking scenes from like X-Men the
Mhm.
animated series, or the Transformers movies, but remade to look like they're the old Marvel comics, and stuff like that. And I was like, oh, like dang, I've got to get this.
Yeah.
I've got to get them to do something for me. And they just knocked out this design showing the two new villains kind of towering over Godpunk in a very like uh, uh, amazing fantasy style cover. And just it's got the little blurb at the bottom like, "Will Godpunk succeed in this latest mission?" and stuff like that. Like, I love it. And then of course Chris did a kind of the stock standard main cover that
Mhm.
will be like the one that hits shelves and goes out to everybody for the default. And it's just an awesome rendition of Godpunk's new form, kind of like holding the original Godpunk in his hand, ominously. And just again with his color work and his sense of scale and scope in, and especially in this piece, in perspective of like translating the kind of like terror and
Mhm.
like internal fear that Connor is feeling in this issue, especially towards the end, just like really came through in this. And yeah, all three covers I'm so happy with. And I ended up including, I had not thought of this at launch, and immediately like the next day somebody was like, how do I get all physical copies of all three covers?
Yeah.
I was like, oh, right, duh. So I like threw in a there's an add-on you can get physical copies of the other two.
Mhm.
When the backer survey goes out at the end of the campaign, you'll get to pick which cover you want, and
Mm.
whichever one you don't select, if you know want the other two, then you can pick that in the add-on. But you can just pick one of the three, and then there's also going to be a exclusive 8x10 print from Will Sir, who did the cover art for issue 1, and he's working on that right now. I'm going to have some previews to put out next week with the weekly update on the Kickstarter and social media and stuff. So I'm excited for that. And yeah, what else do we have? The sticker pack, which if you saw me at Collecticon here in Kansas City, I had the sticker pack out there too. A lot of like Godpunk in various Kansas City sports jerseys,
Mhm.
and like the logo sticker and designs of his helmet. And then do I have one? I kind of have one. For the people watching the video, you can kind of see this a little bit. It's translucent, so it won't show up great. I'm making these little handmade little resin cicada changer keychains for the highest levels. So anybody who backs at the, I think it's the $100 level or higher, will get a little handmade cicada changer keychain. I'm gonna have a bunch of different colors that you can pick in the backer survey, and that's just like something extra that I wanted to do. I don't know. I had wanted to do them for me, honestly. I just wanted to
Mhm.
experiment with like 3D printing a buck, and then molding it and making little resin trinkets, and keychains were like the first thing that came to mind. But Cicada Changer is the morpher. It's the device that Connor uses to transform into Godpunk. And yeah, I wanted to kind of give everybody a chance to have a little piece of Godpunk that they can carry around with them. That isn't just another art print that is like maybe going to go in a pile, or something a little bit too cumbersome, like a helmet or a prop or something like that that would cost a little bit too much for a lot of
Mhm.
backers, or be like a giant pain for like me to fabricate or ship,
Mhm.
or anybody to like display or anything like that. So yeah, those are the kind of like the main rewards that I'm looking for. Or that people can look forward to, is the physical and digital copies of the book. Got 3 different covers to choose from, exclusive prints. The print is only going to be available through the Kickstarter.
Mm.
Obviously, like anything left over when I order the prints, I'll have physically at some conventions, but it's not something that's like going to go up on my Etsy or anything like that. And same goes for the 2 variant covers. The what goes up on my Etsy or any online sales is going to be the stock standard Chris's cover,
Hmm.
and then the vintage style Iguanodon Designs cover is going to be for right now exclusive to the Kickstarter. I'm really pushing that to this is an exclusive incentive for the Kickstarter campaign. And then Kaiju Hime's hand painted design is going to be exclusive for physical sales here in Kansas City. So when I'm at conventions, I'll have it with me at my tables, and it'll be up at Razzleberry at the Country Club Plaza, and hopefully some like local comic shops and bookstores that I'm trying to get into as soon as this book comes out.
Speaking of local shops, how has the local Kansas City community supported this project? I know from personal experience, from talking to you pretty regularly, that there's a lot of support from that community. But I'd like you to talk about that, because I think it's truly amazing how those people are just like, yeah, absolutely. There's Kansas City stuff in it. Let's share that with people. But talk about it.
That's been that is one of like the more fun things that I've been getting to see. Really, again, with issue 2, like having a variant cover that has Kansas City
Mhm.
right smack dab on it, a recognizable landmark, having a lot of like interior pages that showcase landmarks and stuff like
Chiefs
this.
jersey.
Yeah, like Magnus wearing a Chiefs jersey and Winstead's Diner and like things that like locals know about, but isn't necessarily something that you're gonna like a movie made in LA or Atlanta isn't probably going to showcase these kinds of landmarks when they show Kansas City. They're going to show an establishing shot of the skyline, and then they're going to show a set in a different city. And it's been really cool, especially at Collecticon a few weeks ago. Right before the Kickstarter launched, I was set up there with some other local friends of mine, and it was so cool to have people stop by. And I give the spiel of like, yeah, it's like Power Rangers meets Indiana Jones, and Greek mythology, and it's Connor's an archaeologist, and I give the normal elevator
Mhm.
pitch, and then I go, and it takes place here in Kansas City, and their eyes kind of light up, like, oh, wait a minute, like they flip through. I had some like sample pages printed out of issue 2, some finished colored pages we had, and it's like, oh, like that guy's wearing a Chiefs jersey. Like that's the Nelson Atkins. I know that gallery. Like I know
Mhm.
the room that they're walking in. Like I know like that building that's in the background there. Like oh that cover. Like I had Kaiju Hime's cover like sitting there, and like kind of to get to talk to people and be like, oh, I've always wanted a comic in Kansas City, or I've always wanted like a superhero TV show or like a Marvel movie like based out of Kansas City, or oh like it's so cool like Power Rangers not in a generic
Mhm.
uh Southern California town, like Angel Grove Part 15, because they all basically look the same in every season. Like that's been really fun because I I always joke like, and a lot of people do that. Kansas City residents, like Kansas Cityans, are like we all act like tourists in our own town. Like in the best ways, like in like a passionate kind of way, where we like. I mean, I'm wearing a Kansas City Cares or Kansas City Strong shirt right now. Like we all dress like tourists. You walk around Kansas City, there's people wearing like Heart KC shirts. Everybody's wearing Chiefs and Royals and KC Current and Monarchs. Like they're all wearing like local sports stuff and like local landmarks and memes. People are wearing like Taylor Swift and Travis Kelsey shirts and like making jokes about it and talking about stuff like that. We have like our local landmark there, like the Independence Bridge that constantly eats trucks, is like a meme that goes viral on like Reddit and YouTube all the time, and like just happens to be here in KC, and we love that shit. Like there's stuff like that that just walking around Kansas City, like people are going to like talk about the town in a way that someone visiting New York for the first time is going to
Yeah.
talk about New York. And that's a really cool thing that I don't think a lot of towns have. Like a lot of people are like very like protective of their hometown or very like defensive of their hometown. Like you'll have like even with like St. Louis, like I know a lot of people like from St. Louis or who live in St. Louis who will be like very defensive of like, no, like St. Louis is like good for this. Like we have St. Louis has the better barbecue. They don't.
Yeah.
But like, they'll say something like that, right? Or like someone from like Dallas is going to be like, no, like we have the best XYZ, or like, we're, this and that. People from Chicago have
There's a
stuff that
sense
they
of
get really
pride there.
bad. Yeah. And like with Kansas City, it's like up a notch.
Mhm.
It's like we wear it on our sleeves, like literally, and don't get a lot of notoriety for it until very recently. Like until the Chiefs started, until the Mahomes and Kelsey era of the Chiefs, we really didn't have anything like that.
Mhm.
The Royals won the World Series back in 2015. That was the last time we really had kind of like Kansas City on the national stage. Usually when like Kansas City or this part of Missouri or really Missouri at all is hitting the national stage, it's for some like horrible tragedy or one of our politicians said something bad or
Yeah.
like something has happened that's not good and it's going viral on Reddit or something. Like some 4chan user has crept out to talk about Kansas City or something. But yeah, I just like seeing people and even like on the Kickstarter and on the Reddit, people who even like aren't from Kansas City are just like, oh, it's so cool that this is about your hometown. Like
Mhm.
it's cool that you are like putting that passion and that like locality into it, and that like local pride, little bit of sense of like local pride, and also like if you're from the west side of Missouri, you're probably going to tell people you're from Kansas City, even if
Mhm.
you're from like 2 hours away to the north or south. If you're not from St. Louis and you're not from Columbia, you're probably from Kansas City if you live in like this side of Kansas or Missouri. So like, yeah, it's been cool to have a lot of people from like 3 counties over be like, oh yeah, Kansas City, that's my hometown. Like you gotta represent. It's like, yeah, no, you're right.
But you've also got to specify which Kansas City.
We don't, but
Oh.
no, this is my like, it's not even like a border wars thing, right? Like with like
Mhm.
because Kansas and Missouri universities don't really have like the athletic border wars anymore because the divisions have changed over the years.
Oh, okay.
But uh, I mean, it's still like there in spirit, but it's like exhibition games now, so it kind of sucks. But no, like Kansas City, Missouri predates the existence of the state of Kansas. It
Oh,
like
okay.
Kansas City, Missouri was named for, and I'm probably like butchering this in the details, but like Kansas City, Missouri was named for the Kansas River, which is named for a indigenous tribe that was here obviously before anybody else was, and so Kansas City kind of like popped up in the colonizing move westward and started becoming more of a metropolis with all of the river traffic. And as railroads kicked in and industrialization really started to head west, the like one of the last stops west towards like Colorado and California was Kansas City.
Hmm.
And we kind of became a bustling metropolis over that. And when Kansas was popping up, the city of Wyandotte was right next door. And my understanding of it, and this may be a little bit urban legend, is Wyandotte really wanted to kind of cash in and be made relevant by their relationship to Kansas City, Missouri. So they changed their name of Wyandotte to Kansas City, Kansas, and now it's Wyandotte County is the county that KCK is in. And I love KCK. I worked in KCK for quite a few years. I go over to KCK to watch the Monarchs play baseball all the time. It is a drastically different city than Kansas City, Missouri. It is very much the Kansas City, and
Hmm.
like Kansas City, Missouri is very much the like Missouri side of it. It's far Kansas City, Missouri is far more like East Coast. Kansas City,
Okay.
Kansas is a bit more West Coast in that. Uh, I've always heard like St. Louis is the easternmost West Coast city, and Kansas City is the westernmost East Coast city. I don't know how accurate that is or what like metrics they're judging that off of, but you can kind of get those vibes when you go to both cities, especially when you've grown up in them. But yeah, so I don't do the like which city's better thing. The answer is always Kansas City, Missouri, but that's because I'm from here.
Fair enough. So you kind of talked about it earlier that I assist sometimes in the GodPunk dealings. And given the fact that we've worked together sometimes with some of your writing, how do you find collaboration enhances your storytelling?
I think it's utterly necessary.
Okay.
And part of that is because I'm like a like new to creative writing. I like what I'm used to is academic writing from college and kind of like factual textual writing with citations and footnotes and stuff, which does not translate well to basic creative writing, let alone like script writing and
Yeah.
outlining. Like they're drastically different mediums. It's like going from being a painter to being a songwriter. Like you're using the same part of your brain, kind of, but
Mhm.
it's the intricacies are all different. And I kind of had to like unlearn a lot and relearn a lot. And it's been so helpful to have uh, friends and connections like yourself and like Brian
Mhm.
and the Indie Toku guys like Matt and Alejandro and Jared and so many other folks to uh, just kind of like shoot the shit with on
Mhm.
occasion and like jump on a call just like we're doing right now and just like talk through like, hey, this is the idea I have for the script for this issue, or I think this character should do this. Does this make sense? Or especially like Brian has been a huge help with me writing dialogue because that's not something that I had ever learned how to do or had good experience with. And I am so used to like it's got to be perfect grammar, the tenses have to be correct, the sentence length needs to be correct, everything needs to be well explained and cited. And then I end up with, and you can even see this in issue 0 and 1 as I'm like iterating and learning, like,
Mhm.
oh, like those text bubbles are way too damn big. There's way too much. That's so wordy. And like sometimes it works because, like, yeah, Connor's like an archaeology student. He's going to like talk a little bit too much about stuff, but it doesn't make sense for like a 9-year old. Like,
Yeah.
like I'm writing like the script for issue 3 and there's like younger kids in the script and I'm like writing it and Brian just like messages me back and he'll just say like, what child talks like this? Like
Yeah.
how old is this kid? Is it 16? If they're not 16, you need to rewrite this. And it's like, ah, damn, no, you're right. Like, yeah, I've just got to like adjust to that. But I wouldn't have like come by that naturally, like I
Mhm.
wouldn't have, that's not something you can just like watch YouTube tutorials on and figure out. Like you really have to have somebody reading through your stuff and like kind of tearing it apart so you can put it back together again and
Yeah.
not just saying like, "Hey, this is great," and then moving on. Like I hate that. I like that is my like that's worse than being like overly critical and cruel in your
Mhm.
criticisms. I'd rather somebody be like mean and hate it and give me exactly why they hate it and tell
Yeah.
me why it's so bad and like really rip it apart and like try to like destroy me than someone go, "No, I love it. It's great. It's perfect. You don't need to change anything." I hate that. Like I don't like it with like anything I'm doing creatively. If I like would if I were working on a sketch or a painting and somebody said, "No, it's great. Like you don't need to change it." Like, no, I need to. I need to. I
Mhm.
know that I need to change it. Like someone else is gonna know that I need to change it. So I need you to tell me what it is. Like, but yeah, like I think collaboration is like completely necessary, probably for anyone,
Mhm.
but especially for beginners, even if you're collaborating with people who are also beginners, because you just need an outside perspective.
Yeah.
Like you sometimes you're like I will be really, really confident in something and have a second pair of eyes look at it and they're like, oh buddy, this does not work. You've got to redo it. It's like, oh, like you're right. I've been staring at this for too long. Like, yeah.
Okay. Absolutely, man. So, quick question. I'm not as familiar with Kickstarter as I am with Indiegogo. Is there the availability that if you hit your goal, you can keep going?
Yes. So if I hit the goal before the 30 days are up, so
Mhm.
we have the 30 days up until August 3rd, and it's Kickstarter is kind of an all or nothing kind of thing. So if I don't hit the $1,500 by August 3rd, then nobody gets charged and I don't get any money for it. And the same kind of goes for the inverse, where if we go over $1,500, as long as it's before August 3rd, it just keeps piling up. A
Okay.
lot of people will do stretch goals where they'll
Yes.
say like, okay, we'll have our goal is $2,000, but if we raise 3,000, we'll add an extra thingamajig, or we'll add an extra 5 pages onto the comic, or we'll add an extra behind the scenes thing or something like that. I didn't do that for this just because I'm like I didn't want to threaten the monkey's paw
Mhm.
of like getting a little bit too eager or overly confident with it. So I wanted to like really have like, nope, like these are the rewards and this is what the goal is, and let's work on getting towards that. Now, if we go over the goal, I have things in mind that will be popping in that we'll do. That would be that extra cash would be helpful to have to do, but those won't get announced until they happen, I guess.
Mm.
But yeah, if we hit like $2,000 or $3,000 or something, by the grace of the gods, then we will absolutely have some extra goals popping in.
Full size cicada changer coming up, folks.
Honestly, like if you guys like pile in enough and if the pot gets filled enough, something like that is totally doable.
Issue 3 campaign, that could be the top tier,
That is we're already working on the script for it. We've already been talking to Chris about like his schedule and when he can start, when we can start. And we're gunning to go. We've got the first arc's going to be 6 issues. So issue 3 will put us smack dab. I mean, it'll technically be 7 issues if you count issue 0, but we'll go up to issue number 6 is the plan for the first I say first arc, this arc. We'll see what happens after that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I'm excited to kind of keep going.
You are clearly planning way far ahead. You and I are very similar in this aspect. We like to think as our big stories and larger story arcs, but it's all still part of one grand scheme. With this, we, like you said, we're on part 3 of this story here. How has creating this story differed from 0 to 1? Like this writing process. What's been different going into issue 2 that was different from 1 and so on and so forth?
I think the 2 big things have been character development and working on really fleshing out Connor, Emily, and Magnus, the kind of the 3 protags for the whole series. And, their motivations, their weaknesses, their character flaws, their interactions and relationships with each other, with their families, their backstories, really trying to flesh that out, starting with issue 2, really starts with issue 2 and is only going to get more expanded as we go further. Whereas like with 0, there's really not really any like character development. Like it's not a big enough book. The actual main story is only like 10 pages. So I didn't really have enough time nor the skill set to flesh out Connor or Emily or Dr. Makarov or anybody who's in that book. And same goes for 1. Like 1 was a lot of like introducing the setting of this is taking place in Kansas City. Here's what Connor's been doing. This is kind of almost like a day in the life kind of thing. And here's, we're introducing Magnus. We're introducing a little bit more of Emily and her as the voice of reason. And what I'm really gunning for moving forward is laying down, especially with like, again, starting with a lot of stuff really kind of not necessarily hits the fan, but like hits the windshield in issue 2 for the larger plot that's taking place of what are the WASP troopers doing when they're stealing these artifacts? Why are they stealing them? What are their motivations? Who's pulling the strings behind them? How does that connect to Connor and his friends and their backgrounds? And yeah, like trying to weave that in has been fun and stressful with issue 2 and like starting on the script for issue 3. But it's not something that I spent as much time worrying about with issues 0 and 1 because I was really just trying to get the hang of writing still.
So, sorry, I was reading some news over here about
that's never good.
Star Wars stuff. Anyway, while you were talking, I just was sharing our show and stuff popped up, I was like, "What the fuck is that?" Star Wars is so controversial these days; it's absurd. Yep. This is so very absurd. So, you talked about some future plans and stuff. What advice would you give to aspiring comic book writers, especially ones who want to create stories about where they live and stuff like that?
Like the obvious creative advice that I always give to anybody is you just have to do it. And it's not to be like a Nike commercial, but like you do kind of just have to start creating and iterating. And if that is just doodling on a page, character designs, or writing down an outline for a story that you want to do, or starting to try to write a script. If you're a writer, obviously I have more experience from that perspective than from the art side, but same goes, I'm sure for the art side is just start trying. even if you have no experience. I see people on like Reddit and Facebook groups and forums that I'm on, and they'll come in and be like, oh, like I'm not a writer. I don't have any writing experience. I don't have any. I'm not a good artist. I want to make a comic. I don't have any money. What do I need to do? And the answer is always like, well, you need to learn how to draw and you need to learn how to write, because those are the two things that you can kind of do for free, because we have the internet now, and you can sit and watch YouTube tutorials and, burn through some pencil lead and burn through some, pads of paper, burn through. I always suggest like writing stuff down by hand and drawing by hand when you first start, because to me, it gives you a better like tactile sense of what you're working with, especially with drawing, but also like, even though I'm not that old, still grew up learning how to draw before like digital tablets were affordable by any means. So I'm so used to that like very tactile sense with any creative thing. And especially with writing, like I write down all of my outlines in a notepad before I type them into the computer, because it helps me to be able to like not fully erase or remove something and just like backspace it and it's gone. Yeah, like just get started. Go on, join Facebook groups, go on Reddit and find some forums and subreddits that are related to creative writing and like comic book creators. Go on Facebook and find if there's a specific type of comic you think you want to write. If you want to write a horror comic, find a group that talks about horror comics. If you write I don't know, like a romance comic or a manga or an action adventure or superhero comic, like there's going to be groups for people doing that, and they may have like maybe filled with spam and scammers and all that kind of stuff, but you're going to find real people and make real connections you can talk to. Yeah, you really have to you have to put the work in and have the passion for it, and it's not going to be instantaneous and overnight. Like even if you had an endless bank account and just wanted to go and hire the best artist you could find for the money and send them like the best script that you could try to have somebody else write for you or something, you're probably not going to be happy with it, because it's never going to be what you actually wanted, because you didn't go through and do it yourself to that extent. Like, if you're an artist, you can hire a writer, and that, like, to me, that makes complete sense. And even like hiring other artists to do like colors or, lettering and stuff. And if you're a writer, obviously it makes sense to hire artists. But at the end of the day, you need to have an understanding of the craft yourself. And there's a lot of books that you can read. There's a lot of audiobooks and podcasts about writing comics, creating comics. There's Stan Lee wrote a book on creating comics the Marvel way. That's a little bit outdated to like the indie amateur scene now, but it will give you an idea of plot progression and character arcs and script outlines and script formatting. There's no stock standard, industry standard for comic book scripts. It is whatever works for you and your art team.
Trust me.
Yeah, TJ and I don't write scripts the same way. Like they don't look the same. They're different formats. They're different layouts. We have different amounts of detail in various parts.
I'm a visual guy.
That is because yeah, like we have different relationships with our artists too.
Yes.
And like I know what Chris needs written in a panel description.
Yes.
To give him enough to go off of, and what your artist needs to give him enough to go off of. And obviously if you're working with an artist for the first time, you're going to want to be overly descriptive, put a lot of reference images in, things like that. I always steer people away from like doing like AI generative images as concept art. Like that's like, obviously don't use it to actually make comics. That's dog shit.
Yeah.
But I've seen a lot of people trying to like, well, I don't use it to, but when I want an artist to know what I'm looking for, I send them an AI art.
Any level.
Like, it won't work. Like like for one, the ethical problems, but two, it's not unique. Like it would be so much better if you scribbled down a sketch design and sent that to an artist and just give them notes and red lines until you're happy with it. Like that's what hiring an artist is. That's what that interaction is. That's when you hire an engineer to work on a building or something, you're going to have iteration. You're going to have to send them back notes and say, no, actually, I want this here. I want that there. And these dimensions are a little bit off. Let's change this. And I don't want that material. You do the same thing with an artist. Chris sends me back a sketch and is like, this character's too tall, or this costume should look like this, or let's change their helmet around to actually look like this instead. Like that's what it is. And it's like patience is key.
Mm-hmm.
and communication. Like patience and communication are the two things. Like you've got to be able to uh, communicate with like the community at large and other creators.
Yep.
And obviously, if you're going to hire or collaborate with other creators, you got to be able to communicate and be patient. If you're doing this for the first time, you're not. It's not going to happen quick. It's not going to happen. Even if you've got money, it's
Yep.
not going to happen overnight. Like issue 0 for me took like almost 2 years to get made, and I did a Kickstarter and got it funded. Issue 1 took another like year plus to get made, and like that's just kind of how it is when you're at my/our like level
Mm-hmm.
of like creating comics or really creating anything, like even working on podcasts. It's like, how long does it take until you have some semblance of an audience? How long does it take until you know what you're doing, until you can afford decent equipment? Like it takes time. You've got to like really work at it and learn the craft.
100%. And like another thing, when you're not just a writer, you also become the art director. You direct this project because, even like when you're making a movie, you got to get with the cinematographer and he's got to see what's on that script and kind of make that come to life from your vision. And like you said, not always is what you have written down, the artist is going to read it the same way. And art direction is a big part of comic books that people don't really consider. How's the flow of the next page going to be? If it wants the turn, how many pages should I have? How should this page end? How should the next page begin? How many panels on this page? Should I go full Todd McFarlane?
That is such a like, that's such a thing that I've like, especially with issue 2, I've been dealing with, of just like, okay, we're doing 30 pages. And then you kind of go through the script and you're going through it and you're like, oh crap, I need to know like when you turn the page, what page is it turning to? And like, what's the first panel that they're going to read? And like, when's that going into? And how does it flow from the bottom of this page up to the next page? And does that make sense? Or should this scene pivot and you get the reveal when you turn the page?
Yep.
Or this page should be a double page spread, but that means that those pages have to be next to each other. So you're going to have to move this over, but the printer needs it to be an even number of pages.
Yeah.
So how are we going to like, it's stuff like that of like, yeah, you're like, you are an art director and like, a project manager in this, and you're really having to like pay attention to the details and the little flow. And like, I've been lucky to have like Brian and especially like bringing in Chris, who has a really good sense for like panel layout on a page and the flow. And there's been, especially when we were starting out with the sketches for issue 2 of, we send the script over to Chris. He starts doing the sketches out, and we look at it and we go, the flow of these doesn't make sense. Let's switch these panels around, get rid of that one, make this a bigger panel showcasing a little more action or something. Okay, this page needs to be a double page spread. Let's put a few small panels on here, but the big image going across. We'll scoot this page over, scrap that. Issue 12 or page 12 needs to go to the back of the book. That makes more sense. We'll change the lettering on it. Like things like that. You have to be like open to doing that for one. Like I'm sure there's times that I myself was like, Chris was like, I think we should change this. Or Brian was like, you got to move this page. And I'm like, but I wrote it there. I wrote it like this.
And you got to be willing to cut stuff out sometimes if it just doesn't work.
Yeah, you like, not every comic can be 50 pages.
Yeah,
and just like not all movies need to be 3 hours long.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Sometimes you need a movie to be 90 minutes, and sometimes you need a movie to be 65.
Yes,
like it's okay. Like
pacing's the thing, folks.
Yeah, like Evil Dead doesn't need to be a 5-hour long movie.
Yeah.
It's great as it is. Like the classic Universal monster movies don't need to be remade into 3-hour long Snyder
Epics.
Cut films. Like that's they don't need to be these.
There's a place for that, but
there is a place for it. There's a place for it. Director cut things are a thing for a reason. But like not every movie can be Oppenheimer. Sometimes you need a Barbie.
What happened to the hour and 25-minute horror movie? Like where the fuck did that go?
Like it's just like it's dying off, and it's not a thing. And I know like I've even had this consideration with like, should Godpunk be a graphic novel instead of a issue by issue
Mhm.
comic? And I think like for me, like no, partially because I'm it's a little too late. It'd be weird if I switched all of a
Oh,
sudden.
yeah.
Uh, like yeah, that's I've passed that threshold of opportunity. Um, but that's a big like discussion in the indie comics scene is
Mhm.
does it make sense for us to make and market single issue stories when it's incredibly difficult to get indie comics into comic book shops? It's very hard to get into distribution channels like Diamond or what are they, like Luna or any of these companies that distribute to comic shops
Gatekeepers.
and sell online. Yeah, like
Uh,
it's very hard when you're not, and it's very hard to get in with one of the bigger publishers when you don't have any big names attached to you or a
and
portfolio.
let's talk about that. Don't wreck yourself over getting with a publisher. Today's modern comic economy and atmosphere is nothing what it was 20 years ago. It is
100%.
fucking terrible now. If you go to a publisher, a distributor, they're going to fuck with your product. You are essentially writing to continue to tell your story with somebody else having a hand in it. And your timeline's going to be influenced by them, how fast this gets made, what goes in it, all of that. And that's going to be a big consideration when you go into it. You're not going to get into comic books to make a ton of money. Yes, there's the possibility there if it gets optioned for a small screen or big screen adaptation, but that's very few and far between. Go out there, make your book, get your art made. Don't worry about fucking getting it published. I've been there, I've had meetings. Cameron's been there. He's had bad experiences with publishers. It's sometimes it's not worth the hassle. Build your community, build your audience. Go out there, tell your story. Sometimes that's more important than money, fame, or anything like that. And right now, it's kind of harder than ever to get into that because there's a lot of people, like I said, facetiously there with the gatekeeping and shit. It's kind of ridiculous.
It is weird how like we've almost I feel like we've almost the industry has almost pivoted 180 to like back kind of where it was pre
Pre-image.
pre-image, yeah, where like even image now where a lot of image titles are still creator owned and
Todd
most
has
most
become what he hated.
a little bit and like yeah, like most image titles are still creator owned, right? Like I love the massive verse. I love Radiant Black and all of the stories that are coming out from Kyle Higgins and Matthew Groom. Those are great books. But you can even see with like Matthew Groom has Inferno Girl Red, which is connected to Radiant Black and all the massive verse kind of Toku inspired stories. It's very hard, Brody. I know. Like you have like this story and it is creator owned and Matt does Kickstarters for like a volume 1 and they're working on volume 2 of Infernal Girl Red. It's published by Image. He still has to go and do a Kickstarter campaign to
Yeah.
get the book made. And like yeah, he's doing bigger graphic novels, but it's canon in that bigger universe.
Mhm.
And like Radiant Black is getting published, you know, on the monthly basis or whatever it is, and all the spin-off books from that in that universe are getting published through Image, and they're creator owned, but those creators are on a deadline now.
Yep.
Like those artists need to get books out at a certain pace, and like that means that you have to be able to hire artists that are able to do that, and that comes at a price, and that means that you have to be able to put out scripts at that rate, and you have to have an idea of this issue is going to come out in October, so it's the Halloween issue. And this issue is going to come out in December, so it's the Christmas issue. You know, if you
Mhm.
want to do that, but like you do have to think of it that way.
And what is the current like once a month new issue, something like that right now?
Sometimes it's hard. It depends. Like Spider-Man, yeah, they're going to have like once a month.
Yeah.
Something
That's what
like
my
Radiant
Batmans are
Black,
right now. Yeah.
yeah, like something like Radiant Black is like maybe once a month, but
Mhm.
probably every other.
Mm.
Even like the I think the like was it IDW's Godzilla books are usually like once a month, like Godzilla versus Power Rangers and stuff like that tend to be once. I think they're once a month. but then they're limited runs. You have maybe 4 to 6 issues. A lot of like um, creator owned and indie books tend to be short runs. You know, 4 to 6 issues is pretty common. Who is it? Skybound. They are a subsidiary, like daughter company of Image. They're an imprint of Image. They're publishing the Transformers and GI Joe and all that stuff for Hasbro right now, but they're also publishing adaptations of the Universal monsters. So right now, actually, I think in like 2 weeks, I think in August, the last issue of the Creature from the Black Lagoon adaptation comes out.
Oh,
and I've been reading that book like crazy, and I love it. They did a Dracula before that, and I think Frankenstein's monsters next. I think they may have already done a Mummy too. I'm not sure, but
I hope they do the Fly. That'd be cool.
Yeah, like it's a really cool thing that they get to do and they get to churn out. And obviously, that's not a creator-owned IP; that's in partnership with Universal. But like even that, it's like, oh yeah, they're putting it out like maybe 1 book a month, and it's 4 issues for a story. And I don't know. I know indie creators that have worked with like bigger name, more established publishers that have distribution, and it's like the best you can do sometimes is get your book, your story included in an anthology that gets put out once a year, and then you're now restricted to 6 pages once a year, and like that's really hard to tell a story in a continuing story in 6 to 12 pages once a year. It's already hard to do that in a traditional like 24-page comic or a 30-page comic, let alone anything less than that, and trying to mix that in with other other pieces and and like stuff like that. Like it just doesn't I don't know, it's weird to like Brody's throwing me off. Like like the industry's just like it's kind of like really screwy, and it is better to kind of not necessarily stick it out on your own, but you can at the end of the day only rely on yourself and your team and your community. And what I mean when I say like it's kind of gone back to pre-Image days, a lot of what I mean is like you need to be kind of going to events if you can afford to table at small Comic-Cons or hang out at a local shop. Like if you want to like hang out at like a local comic shop, like I've been really lucky to get to hang out at Apex Comics down in Harrisonville for like Free Comic Book Day. And like every now and then I'll do a favor for him, and he's like, oh hey, we've got an event coming up, you can do you want to, you and this other creator or whoever, do you guys want to have tables down here? We've got a convention in November, $20 a table or something. I'm going to be at an event this weekend in Blue Springs called Karma Community Market. That's just literally, it's in the name, community market. It is just locals getting together, and they do different themed market events with different vendors basically every weekend, I think. And like stuff like that is where you net hardcore fans now. Like that's kind of where you net the regulars, in my experience. Like that's where you're going to meet somebody who's like, hey, give me your email, hey, give me your phone number, hey, give me your socials, and they'll like DM you and ask more about it. Or like they'll actually like, I met people at Collecticon, and it's like, oh, I sold out of issue 0. Can you give me your info and I'll order one from you when it's in stock,
there you
or vice versa. Like, they'll give me their info and they're like, hey, you just let me know when it's back in stock, and like stuff like that. Like you need to be, build up an email list if you can, get an email subscriber list and do a newsletter. You can do them for like free on MailChimp and like Substack and stuff. And just really work to build that community. And you don't necessarily need to fret about like social media numbers. It helps. The downside of like big conventions for me especially has been, it's really hard to get into a convention when nobody knows who you are. So the bigger conventions, it's like, oh, I have 900 Instagram followers or something, and I'm not going to bring a lot of people into the convention probably just looking for me. So they may glance over me in lieu of
and they might now after seeing that mullet, but
yeah it's technically not a mullet. I have an undercut. Yeah. It's technically not a mullet.
He does a top bun. Something like that, like a samurai.
Yeah. Yes, I can do the top pun.
Did I hear male or male chimp? He said.
Yes. Porque no los dos. No, yeah, I just like I've especially with issue 2, but I even learned that with issue 1 really of like, I just through friends got my book into the Razzleberry shop, which is just like it's all locally made stuff at a little store, little kind of a boutique shop that sells. They've got candles and stickers and art prints and T-shirts and nice like handmade fashion pieces and purses and stuff. And then I've got my comics there. Brian has his art prints there. And like those kinds of things are really nice. Like I'm trying to get into like the Made in KC stores that are like on the plaza and around the city and in the airport. And like
You need a billboard.
Oh God, those are expensive. I looked. That was literally Brian and I were like, what do we do to get this out? What do we do to press? Like,
Yeah.
we'll get on one of those digital billboards for like 48 hours. And it's like, oh, we don't have $5,000. Like stuff like that. Cause like, even like, like Facebook's kind of a ghost town now. Like
Yeah.
it's like, like dead internet
Even
theory
though
is taking place a little bit.
I've seen the GodPunk #2 commercial a fuck ton under-sponsored.
Yes. If you pay for sponsored posts, your stuff will get seen.
Yes.
But if not, it is really tricky. Even if you have an established audience. Like I have people who have followed me on Instagram and Facebook for years who are like, oh, I haven't seen one of your posts in like a month. And it's like, well, I've been posting every day.
Yeah.
And it's like, you can't compete with the algorithm. It will change constantly. And it is, I mean, there's a reason that's people's full-time jobs is to understand the algorithm and the metrics and how to like cheat it and mess with it. Yeah. Like that is a skill set that I don't have and don't want to necessarily gain. And a lot of people like don't have the time or skill set or money to do that. And it's a shame. But what you do probably have the time and maybe the skill set is to like go to your local comic shop and talk, just make a relationship with the owner or the employees there.
Yep.
And like, yeah, maybe it's really hard to figure out how to sell your book there. It's hard for me to figure out how to sell my book there, but the owner wants to. Like,
bingo.
We have a relationship. He wants to figure out how to make it work. So we're figuring that out. And the way that it is right now is to have me at as many events as he can host and have like flyers out and, posters up of my book and things like that. And that's like, that means a lot to me personally, but it also like, it shows local support. It shows like it's a trustworthy source. Somebody walks into that shop, they're in there every Wednesday buying their new comics.
Mm-hmm.
If that guy says this is a book you need to buy, it's a book you need to buy.
Or like, somebody brings their kid in and be like, hey, there's a comic book. If the kids want to do something like that, that's always something.
Yeah. And like, it's taken a lot. I am not an extrovert. I am like incredibly introverted. I do not like confrontation. I do not like social interactions. It has taken a lot of like evolution and personal, like liquid courage and like swallowing my anxiety to, hang out at convention tables for 3 days in a row and talk to hundreds of people. Yeah. Like it is like, it is not like a great time for my heart rate. But I am learning how to do it, and I'm like, it's showing dividends. Like, and that's another thing to like partner with a guy like Brian or you, who are more outgoing and more social and more able to get that, get the word out and really like push me to make, video commercials and ads and like Brian to like push me to like, when people walk by my table, don't just say hi and stop talking. Like you like say, hi, here's my comic, here's what it's about, and start a conversation. And like, I'm not a good salesperson. I never have been. And I like, unless it is something I actually give a shit about, like my own creation, it's really hard for me to like try to convince someone to give me their money.
Yeah.
Like, no, like you have better things to spend that on probably. Like you don't need to spend your $10 on my book or something. But they do need to spend their $10 on my book.
Yes.
I have to be able to tell them like, no, you will enjoy this. You will have a good time. Like that is what this is for.
Yeah. And I'm going to say it's time to wrap this up. It's definitely past the hour of power, one would say, But I think we got all the info one could possibly need about GodPunk issue number 2 without actually reading GodPunk issue number 2. And if you actually want to read it, go up there, scan that QR code, or go over to Kickstarter.com and search for GodPunk, and I'm sure it will pop up. Thank you, Cameron, for coming back on the first episode of the Power Hour in years. I appreciate it, buddy. Thank you for everybody listening. Thanks for everybody who commented and tuned in for this live stream. I'll see you guys hopefully next week with another interview and another episode of the TJ Bowser Power Hour. I've been TJ Bowser. That's been Cameron Lee. Bye-bye.
See you guys.